Oh, it's Laura? Yeah. Laura.
It's got to be louder.
Yeah. Really?
I'm just.
Morning. It goes louder if it's not in the speaker. It's the clean version. Yeah. It's loud. It's Laura. Dang. Mine's not that loud. Oh, wait. I don't like loud. I thought there anyways. Are you coming?
Yeah, all about that base. I looked through the thing for the book yesterday, and like your titles are the best. Thank you. Thanks.
Wait till you see the Bitmojis.
Oh, your anniversary. Excellent.
Clean room. I did this morning, and I added drop shadows to your Bitmojis and transitions.
Oh wow. Okay.
Right. Taking this thing to national levels.
Yeah. There's copywritten information on here.
Don't need anything?
I don't think I'm okay.
Is this a thing that can click? That's this one. Ah! Are you trying to get her Bitmoji in there?
Yeah, with my one bar.
Connect to the tech line. There's a key here.
Well, then I have to log on my computer.
No, if you just copy it and then open slides. Do you have slides?
Yeah, that's too much of a process.
Okay, so that song is loaded. Now we need to load what the mine.
Password, D10 learns. Is it a hashtag? Oh, I tasked it.
Bad work, man.
Okay, we need to turn that on.
Well, I'm just letting it load. We need a referral. It does, it goes louder. Did you hear? Here's how that.
Yes.
Okay. God, my heart rate is going to go up. Yeah. We dance. We should have choreographed.
I'm replacing your team awesome. Is that okay?
My flag? Me running in with the flag?
Okay, fine.
No.
No.
It transitions in beautifully.
Okay, well, you're gonna have to add in transitions for. I can't. Okay, see that.
Right.
If you don't mind.
Not a problem. Did you sign in yesterday?
So Heidi. Yeah, there's a stripper pole.
Yeah, put that in there. I told Renata we should put the school sucks one on the classroom management.
I really wanted to use the one make me proud, but I didn't fit it.
Do it in the group A thank you one.
Okay, come on now, send.
The sounds are probably not that hard.
Yeah, I will.
They're
Yeah, I will.
having some problems.
What do you want me to say about universal screening?
Pretty much anything on the slides. Were there any you weren't sure of what to say?
No.
I'm trying to remember. I think there was one point that I just saw that I thought maybe we should elaborate a little more. Like I need to sit where I'm
Universal screening does not diagnose problems, determine intervention strategies. Diagnose problems comes from the
further assessment.
analyzing the information. Determine intervention strategies.
Further assessment investigation. The initial screen does not do that for us. We have to,
I don't know, but look at us.
Should we run through it real quick? You know, you want me to click your parts? Since I know the timing.
Yeah, I went through it this morning. I printed out a copy.
Oh, it worked. 'Cause I tried to make a PDF. And it was like,
Yeah, it took a while to
forever
load.
waiting.
Do you want to make a copy of that?
No, I'm fine. I'll look at it. I was thinking to upload.
I have prizes, I forgot.
Oh,
Prizes.
I don't know if we can figure out what to do with it. But
Maybe we could give them a quiz at the end. Or like share out.
they're leftovers from my kids.
Can we win prizes? Oh, let's see.
Vicky?
Just want to close our other tabs so it runs smoother because we have a heavy, Google Slides. Oh, look.
Good morning.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Oh, it's warm in here.
You know, yesterday was freezing and earlier today, I'm like, oh, this is nice.
Oh, there's one in there.
Yeah, that smells.
That's gonna be me tomorrow.
You know, I had a doctor.
I'm ready, lady.
Well, he put it in the head.
Well, you only one.
Trying to.
No, I didn't know I was gonna pick it. That's why I gotta watch what I do always. I always get because I'm always watch this
So Jason, tomorrow I will be here. Can you send me the link to what is a nice movie?
actually
Watch with Wendy.
If you choose the same thing.
Yeah, I will.
Who gets to choose though? You or her?
Me.
stop spacing out. I'm not gonna go.
I like her.
Where are you?
I wasn't. No, not you. Somebody else who's not here.
And then
Yeah, I can. The only time I had to call for that.
Right. Okay. All right, welcome everyone.
Like I said, I have that.
We are presenting on Tier 1. We have a song theme of All About That Bass, if you couldn't tell by our slides and our song playing. Though the bass that Megan Trainor sings about is a bit different than the bass we'll be talking about, it's still a pretty catchy way to think about Tier 1. So if you don't know who we are Laura Hollis, Brian Man, and Jason Taylor. You can also see our Bitmojis on the screen. But to start off, this is one part of a 3-part series that some of the MTSS committee members will be presenting throughout summer learning. So if you like this one, come back for the other ones. We're first talking about Tier 1 with All About That Bass by Megan Trainor. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about Tier 2 and Tier 3 with How Long by Charlie Puth. And then later this afternoon, we're talking about special education with 1 Foot by Walk the Moon. This is the one that best ties into the song theme, so you don't get your hopes up for this. But if you're here, you should be here. And if you're not, it won't hurt us too bad if you leave right now and go to the correct place. And if you're out there and you should be here, I can't really help you. But we're hoping that participants in this session will gain the knowledge to strengthen your Tier 1 within an MTSS framework by developing a common understanding of the key components of Tier 1, the importance of universal screening, and then a bit about analyzing the core instruction and differentiation of instruction. And our plan is that we will cover best practices in Tier 1 that can be applied to score all of our learners and promote academic achievement and social emotional well-being. So yeah, it's pretty clear that the majority of students should be successful at Tier 1. The number 80% has been thrown around in the literature, but don't get too hung up on 80% as a definite cutoff. What you really want to remember is the majority of our students should be successful at Tier 1. So if you think of the RtI triangle, and RtI, response to intervention, is something that falls under the MTSS framework. So it is still correct to say RtI. RtI and MTSS can coexist. So you're not wrong, or MTS is not the new RtI. But if you think of the RtI triangle, Tier 1 is your base of that triangle, and our Tier 2 and our Tier 3 supports built on top of that base. So it's not that you go up the ladder and you exit Tier 1 and go into Tier 2 or Tier 3. It's that you build those supports on top of your Tier 1. So it's all about that base. And no trouble. So what is Tier 1? What is this base that we're talking about? When you think of Tier 1, think of high quality, evidence-based core instruction. Core is a word that we're going to be bringing up a lot in this session. Think of instructional, classroom management, and prevention programs at the class, school, or at district level. So we're not thinking individual students. We're not thinking small groups of students. We're thinking bigger picture. At the smallest, your whole class, maybe the grade level, the school, or the district level. And it's really the foundation for all students to be successful. So, in a nutshell, Tier 1 is universal, proactive, explicit instruction for all of our students. So not just the students within the average range. It's also for our low achievers. It's also for our high achievers. We're targeting all of the students that we have. Because our hope is that if we build up our core instruction and we're targeting all of our students, then we're going to build up all of our students at the same time. So now we have a story that I'm going to read out loud for you. It's called Moving Upstream, A Story of Prevention and Intervention. Some of you might have heard this story before. It's not a story that relates directly to MTSS or even to education, but we can pull out pieces of it. So, in a small town, a group of fishermen gathered down at the river. Not long after they got there, a child came floating down the rapids calling for help. One of the group members on the shore quickly dove in and pulled the child out. Minutes later, another child came, then another, and then many more children were coming down the river. Soon, everyone was diving in and dragging children to the shore, then jumping back in to save as many as they could. So we've got children floating down the river. We don't know where they're coming from, but everyone's jumping in and putting effort in to try and save them. In the midst of all this frenzy, one of the group members was seen walking away. Her colleagues were irate. How could she leave when there were so many children to save? After long hours, to everyone's relief, the flow of children stopped, and the group could finally catch their breath. At that moment, their colleague came back. They turned on her and angrily shouted, "How could you walk off when we needed everyone here to save the children?" She replied, "It occurred to me that someone ought to go upstream and find out why so many kids were falling into the river. What I found is that the old wooden bridge had several planks missing, and when some children tried to jump in over the gap, or jump over the gap, they were trying to jump in, jump over the gap, they couldn't make it and fell into the river. So I got someone to fix the bridge." All right, so pretty quick story, but if you're thinking of the story, the bridge represents our Tier 1 instruction. We want to strengthen that bridge. What we want to do is have students successfully cross that bridge. And some students are going to cross it just fine. Some are going to fly across the bridge. Some are going to go across the bridge a little more slowly. Some will need extra support to cross the bridge. Some might need a different bridge or another means of transportation to get across the river. We're going to have a whole different spectrum of students. But the more effort we put into building and strengthening our bridge, the less effort we're going to need to save those students who fall through and can't make it across the bridge. So strengthening our bridge is going to strengthen it to make it so that all students can cross. It's a prevention effort. So it's all about that bridge or base. So we should know which students are struggling to learn. We should change instruction to those students so that they can learn better. We should select instructional strategies based on evidence showing they work, and we should evaluate our efforts locally to see whether we are indeed positively impacting learning. So it sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but we can do it. With universal screening, to analyze core instruction, and to plan for differentiation.
that moves into the components of RtI, which is a part of MTSS. So if you take a look at the visual, all of those circles that are golden and purple are the main components of a successful RtI system. So you see screening, progress monitoring, and a multi-level prevention system. So like what Vicki said, it's all about tier 1, it's all about the phase, it's that prevention. What are you doing to proactively support those students and having a solid foundation? So what we're going to discuss next is just that top left circle, the screening, looking at universal screening. So this is a full from Vicki, I think adequately defines universal screening. If the water in the aquarium is dirty, it makes little sense to spend our time diagnosing individual fish. Take a look at the larger picture. How can we support all of the fish before identifying any problems that they might have? So what is universal screening? Universal screening provides that overall measure of what we are doing. Is it working? Is it effective for the students? It provides the indicators for academic and social and emotional abilities of the students. So it's kind of like what I think of as like a doctor checkup. Whenever you go in for your annual physical at your doctor, typically they ask you, how are you doing? Any concerns? If you say, nope, everything is good, what my doctor typically does is still follows up with a blood test and takes a look at that. But if there's no issues from that, then there's no need for any other intervention. But let's say you go to the doctor and you're complaining that your arm hurts. They might ask you some more questions, might look into that with further tests or assessments. Same thing with universal screening. If you do an assessment and all students come out okay, there's no issues that are raised, no need to move forward. However, if we do identify, let's say maybe most of the students are not responding to that instruction, let's take a look into that with further assessment to determine if additional instruction is needed. So these are the do's and don'ts of screening. So the screening should align to your curriculum and instruction and be time and cost effective. We do not want to spend all of our time screening students where you want the majority of your time put in is improving your core instruction and then also remediating any student needs. So adding additional instruction or supports if they're needed. And universal screening does not diagnose the problem. That comes from your analyzing the data and information that you get from those screenings. And it also doesn't determine those intervention strategies. That comes from your professional judgment of your best practices. So universal screening helps support the replacement of the wait to fail model. So if you think of a teacher referral, one teacher might refer student A that is in their classroom, while teacher B might not refer the same student that has those same needs in their classroom. If we give all students that screener, that assessment, we're identifying those students in classroom A, B, and C that might have similar needs. So moving forward with the universal screening, it makes more of a student-focused approach. And then it also helps mismatch any issues that there might be in our curriculum. So we fill those holes if we identify any. So overall, these are the goals of universal screening. So just to determine how students are responding to instruction, determine how many students, if any, are at risk, what supports are needed for our students that are considered gifted or talented, how can we continue to extend those, and also helps us identify those students, which students need further assessment and instruction in what specific areas. It also helps us to determine if our core instruction is effective, so if we have that solid tier 1, that solid base, and what other resources might be needed. So assessment alone is not sufficient to support our core or our tier 1. It goes along the lines of curriculum, so that is what is taught, and then also instruction. So that's how it's taught. And then assessment, which is, are the students getting to where we want them to go? Are they hitting that target? So all 3 of those are needed to ensure that we have that balanced assessment system. If you just want to take a moment and check out Mr. Taylor's been
emoji present.
That was painful. So can we go back, please? What you're missing in this presentation is I got 15 reminders from Vicky and the crew that I needed Bitmoji, and I am not a Bitmoji fan, but I played along. I mean, it's a team effort, team approach.
I got a request. I have one of you.
Yep.
I did not.
So believe it or not, we're halfway through this awesome learning opportunity. So I feel like as a group, there may be some questions or anything that you've seen thus far that you would like to go back and ask and fire away.
The only things that I'm thinking as we're going through, so we hear this a lot, is our curriculum. We hear it from Mr. Bennett. But how are we making those decisions? I feel like we've been hearing that for 2 years. Is our tier 1 curriculum enough? But then I don't know that anything happens from it. Like, what's the next step? Or is that probably the next part of your presentation? I should just, okay.
Great segue. Great segue. I like that you're thinking about that.
Any other thoughts? And make sure you're writing those down on the pink sheets because those are things that'll win you prizes. Anybody else?
When you talk about universal screening, is that like our, I want to call it discovery, iReady and Ames Lab and all of that?
Yeah, it could be that. It could also be the classroom assessments, if you do classroom assessments at the beginning of the year to determine where students are at. That could be another measure as well.
We gotta go get. What? Oh, we got them.
I got them.
They match our slides.
So my contribution to the presentation is talking about analyzing the core, and that somewhat goes into the comment that Danielle just made. And in terms of talking about the core, we're talking about our tier 1 instruction for our major subjects during the day across the district, kindergarten through 8th grade. So as we proceed, one of the first jobs that I take after each assessment round is to go in and see how we're doing. And this is an iReady report called the Proficiency Towards State Testing. This was pulled down in the winter of last year, and it just basically took every kid that had taken iReady. If you look to the far right, so it's not necessarily complete at that point, 672 of 703 students total had taken the assessments of that round. The top report is reading, the bottom report is math. And that basically took our iReady assessment and compared to where we were going to be if they took the PARCC test coming up in the spring. So in terms of our numbers, you can see, as the last 2 years have shown us, we're a little stronger in reading than we are in math. And then each of the assessment levels, level 1 through 5, 4 and 5 being college and career ready for Illinois' sake, levels 1, 2, and 3 being solidly below. Last year, the assessment report from iReady winter to spring was within 5 percentage points. I'm curious to see if it does the same thing for this next year. But again, this is part of analyzing the core to see how many of our students are on level. And there are many ways to do that, from Ames Web to iReady, but this is a district snapshot to start off. Right? So the data is there. What are we doing with it? Are we having a conversation as a district? Are we talking at a school level? Are we breaking it down in each of your classrooms? And then what does that mean for each individual student? My hope would be that we have a stronger understanding after this year of what we're doing at each of those levels to support and understand, is what we're doing working? And do we have the tools in our district to make improvement if we continue down this path? So my hope, and one of the things that has come out of the MTSS committee, there has not been a district conversation about how we're doing. There has not been a conversation across the district on what our data is telling us. So that's the first step. We need to, as 3 buildings, come together and have conversations about what are we doing well, what can we show improvement in, and what are we learning from this information. You know, this camp is awesome. It's an opportunity to come together and learn about a lot of topics. But another thing, if we see that we're weak in certain areas, bring in professional development on those topics. That's the first step, in my opinion. And then also with our MTSS process, we need to continue supporting all levels of learners, not only in your classrooms, but then once we get a handle on core instruction, talking about how we support more diverse learners, from the high-end students to the students who are below level. So here's just one example. And I know I have a lot of my compadres from Franzen in the room right now, but this is pulling a 3rd grade report from last year. And this is going into the reading area of 123 students that took the assessment, taking a look at some of our results. So how about a representative from Peacock? If you were to look at a report like this, what would you glean from it? What would you take away as an area of needed improvement? No wrong answers. Come on, let's hear from a few of you.
Get prizes. And share out tickets.
I will give you that it is a little blurry, but what you will see is the highest amount of students were low in the area of vocabulary. 63 students in parentheses of the 123 that took the assessment were showing as below level. Okay, that's the highest number on the board.
You guys, so it would be it's hard to see, but it's 51%, and then that would be it says 513.
And then the high frequency words is a little deceiving because that's something they should have come in ready to tackle or be passed already. There were only 3 students that were below there, but still there were a few students that were below in high frequency words. So as we looked at this last year, we saw that vocabulary needed to be something we continued the conversation on, okay? So as that became a trend, we devoted some PD time. We talked about it at grade level teams. Vicki, go ahead and proceed. It's okay. So again, this school year, at the start of the year, we took that same assessment, different group of kids, but again, we had 50 students who were below grade level in vocabulary. And again, just as many students below in high frequency words.
It's a lot of growth though.
Now, yeah, so I apologize. I should have noted that. That first one was from a previous year.
Okay.
This is from this year. And then, yes, you will see tremendous growth. Next slide. So again, in 16-17 as a district, discussions on professional growth, the importance of academic vocabulary. As a school, we reviewed iReady scores, discussions at team level. And then at the classroom level with the 3rd grade team and others, we started the strategies to support those students. And at the student level, what strategies were we going to put in place that was going to make the biggest impact? So as we proceeded into this year, we reviewed the iReady scores, set some attainable goals in the area of vocabulary, grade level goals, professional development, shared out with staff, reviewed strategies at team meetings, and then also had a pre and post assessment I'd like to dive into here in a few minutes. This was that same report towards the end of the year.
Wow.
So in terms of vocabulary making a pretty large impact, this is just one grade level, but you could basically replicate it across the other 2. And the part that made me most proud is we have a lot of people here that devoted some professional development hours, presented to our district in October, did the same thing at the school level. And I really feel like we could shake our heads and say that's been a positive area of growth. Anybody that participated in that want to share out a little more? Knowing that you're all here, I want you to get the positive due that you need.
I think a lot of it we were very aware of. We really narrowed down, and Brooke helped us with this a lot as we took some of those words that we saw the kids were struggling most with. We had them do basically a quiz on Google so we could get an idea of what they knew and what they didn't know. And we worked on those, we focused on, I think it was 8 of those 4 words. And then throughout the course of the year, we're very intentional about how we use them, where we use them. And I guess just us being more aware of using the vocabulary correctly and being more aware of what we were saying, and then did that post-test and saw.
Yeah, we hung up the words in our classroom, and the kids became very aware that the words were there, and every time the kids used it or we used it, we put a sticker up on the wall, and it turned out that they started using the words more frequently, and then they were able to do better on that.
Did you just different 8 words? Or just 8 words?
There was words that we saw that they struggled to use within the pre-test.
Okay.
Yeah,
And it wasn't the whole year. It was, when did we start? Yeah.
Yeah, so we took a look at what they call tier 2 words, so words that are used across academic domains. So words like analyze, text, paragraph, summarize, that students see in multiple areas, not just in English language arts. So we could target that across the school day with all instruction. And what we did is we took all the words that kindergarten through 3rd graders should know, and we gave students that pre-assessment to see really where our students falling at. So one example that I always like to share is the word text, thinking that most students know what text is. They knew what a text was, but it wasn't our definition of a text. It was the text message that you send on a phone. So really redefining what students
what their understanding was of that vocabulary word. And we just took those 8 most severe, where students did not know the word at all or did not know the definition. And that's what the 3rd grade team targeted. And please feel free to jump in. But really what we found is that with just more attention to that, not spending a whole lot of time on it, but incorporating a few minutes here and there, like when students were transitioning in from recess, can you summarize how recess was? Using more of that academic vocabulary, and our college students really responded to that, and we saw the growth not only on that post-assessment, but then also on their spring iReady assessment.
What was really interesting for us too is with some of the things that came up that they didn't know, we were shocked because they knew how to use it. When we would verbally talk to them about it, they give us a summary or give a prediction. They knew what those things were, but to see it in writing, when it's in a question, they couldn't make that connection that that's what they were supposed to do. So when we went through and looked at that list, we were all shocked to see the ones that they didn't know. We knew we've talked about it. They knew how to predict. They knew how to write a summary, but it was just going from us verbally using it to putting it in front of them and using it in our daily questioning. And that made a big difference.
If you attended Kathy Bruni's session yesterday, she went over this too in the action in the classroom. And if you click on one of the links, there was a bookmark that you could get that had the standard and the grade level, but then had a good chunk of all the academic appropriate vocabulary for each grade. So you kind of know where they should know for your grade level.
So before I move on, one other comment, Lisa, I was hoping you'd bring this up, just that conversation about Greek and Latin roots at the 4th grade level. And knowing all we had to do there was go back and review the standard to see some of the words, concepts, prefixes that maybe we were not focusing on as much. That also became part of the classroom conversation. We saw some good results there. I think the hope was now let's make that a full year job versus just waiting until half of the year. Any other comments? Brooke, anything else to add?
Yeah, no, overall, I think it's just taking a look at those assessments and slightly changing the instruction we saw had a huge impact for 3rd grade.
So in terms of taking that one example that I just shared with you and scaling that out across other curriculums, I think the first task is looking across the district at our curriculums, what's working, what needs improvement, and then focusing some conversation at the team level, professional development strategies, and look what we're able to do. We're able to scale that out across other areas. I think we're moving along the right track, but that conversation needs to happen first and foremost. Thanks.
Okay, so some myth busters about differentiation. And so there's a question that'll pop up on the next slide. Do you think this is a truth or a myth? Differentiated instruction is a collection of strategies. Go ahead and talk to your table for what you think it is.
And maybe a why.
I think if you do that reassess. No, you have to narrow down. Retest it. A lot of people are gonna all of
All right, what do we think? Is this truth or a myth? Differentiated instruction is a collection of strategies. Do you think this is a truth or a myth? A myth. Okay, go ahead. It is a myth. So the truth is that differentiated instruction is a lens for implementing any strategy in all pedagogy. So you have to think of it as this way. Consider an effective teacher has a wealth of tools. So you have your toolbox you come in with that you're going to meet all of your students' needs. So with this differentiated instruction as a lens, thinking of it as that from that perspective, you have to go in your toolbox and pick what is my best tool for that individual student. Would you use a screwdriver to hammer a nail?
I obviously know.
Probably not, unless you're me. You don't know which tool any of them are.
So that seems obvious. Yet there are many learning experiences where a diamond point screwdriver is used to tighten the connection with a screw that needs a flat blade. I would have no idea that that was the case. So this is where I would maybe go ask for assistance with somebody that knew tools better and could help me out. Diagnosing students based on data helps teachers identify the best tool to design the appropriate learning experiences. Some examples that you already use, you just need to recognize that this is what we're doing for this tier already, are graphic organizers, doing various reading levels, and taking note strategies. So differentiated instruction is a lens that we are going to continue to use as we also analyze data and flip through the planning process. And then it's a great strategic impact on student learning, and it ensures that we always use the right tool for the right student. So this is a great little graphic organizer that I found that really kind of breaks down the differentiation process. So you have three different parts: the planning, the pre-assessment, and the differentiation. We all are right now pretty much in the planning phase. We're looking at what do we want to do. Well, then we need to assess the students. We can't just plan without knowing where our students are at. So that's why we give those universal screenings or just our pre-assessment from our curriculum of what do the students already know to where do I want them to be. And then that's going to come from how do I differentiate based off of their learning. So I think the key here for me that I have to really process is that differentiation. We always look at the low end of our students, but what are we doing for the enrichment part? So that's kind of where you have to look at that gradually of where are my students at from each level. And then this is really hard to see, but these are some really awesome strategies. If anybody wants this link, I'm definitely willing to share it. But some of the strategies are just breaking down then into content, the process, and the product. So each one of these is where do you want to look at? What focus do we need in order to help guide those students? A lot of these we already do. We model, we ask questions, we use reading buddies. Okay, so that would then fall under the content. The process is going to be, how do we highlight? How do we teach students proper ways to highlight? What are some tools that they would need to do that? Also, developing agendas. Maybe my schedule is going to look different than someone else's, but that's because what I need is different than what another student needs. And then the product. Maybe we can incorporate some more technology, a podcast, incorporating voice to text for our students that can't verbalize as well or read as well. So maybe having that computer screen and being able to voice what they have to say and record it that way is easier for them than trying to type it out. So there's just different tools. This is great. This website has tons of resources if anybody would like to. And then how do I differentiate in my classroom? A lot of these practices we're already doing. You use multiple intelligence, technology, using our formal assessments to drive instruction. What are some students' interests? If you attended the ELA differentiated yesterday, she really had a lot about differentiating, but just giving the students a choice. Here's 10 books that are within your range. Which one's of interest? You're going to be able to differentiate and provide student choice. Student learning style, graphic organizers, and thematic units. California Resource Center has tons of awesome free graphic organizers if anybody ever wants to utilize them, and you can print them. Or they have it as a PDF so you can copy it over and use it digitally.
What's up there? What?
Thematic unit. It's
a thematic unit?
Yeah, just
okay, because I was looking, I don't know what that is.
No, just a typeware.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to you're pointed out. I totally wasn't doing that. I just thought, I don't know.
You're nice.
Is it hot? Could be.
Look at you using your roots.
I know.
Good connection.
Really proud of myself.
So in conclusion or in summary, intervention without prevention will not address the root of the problem. Bailing water out of a boat, here's another boat metaphor, won't be effective unless you also plug the leak. So if the stronger we build our boat, and welcome to the SS Tier 1 curriculum, instruction, and assessment, the less lifeboats we will need, like interventions, IEPs, 504 plans. There's comments.
So, which one?
The one you just said.
The differentiated one? I'll have to look it up on my computer and find it, but it's, I have it. Florida Research Center.
Florida.
Yeah.
Why don't we got some time, why don't we show some?
So, yeah, we can show some.
The website.
I think too, just like be a gen ed teacher, like the biggest part of what I've gotten out of this is that realizing like what can we do to be more proactive with our students so that we're keeping them out of the tier 2 and 3. Like what can I do as a teacher in the classroom to keep them within the base level of tier 1? Yeah. Sorry. No, you're fine.
Everybody else?
I was not going to.
I don't know. I was just.
Okay.
Everybody.
Like the box with the locks.
But it's digital. Oh.
Sorry, your friends.
So you're on your.
Vicky,
I didn't tell her where to go. I said, I
who's
just-
logged in?
Laura said I think I'll put a question.
No, this is yours.
Somebody can exit me out.
I don't know, I'm gonna send something to your drive to show.
I had the right thing. I just maybe scroll up.
Did you ask them?
Oh, no, they showed me how to do it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't.
Oh, you live here.
Can't explain anything anymore.
You like it? I love presenters.
Hey, Brooke. You know where the vocabulary words are?
So yeah, there's a couple.
I'm gonna share that out with you.
The classroom in action is what she was talking about yesterday. If you guys have not seen this yet, it's awesome. So this is where there's a lot of vocabulary tools. I'm sorry, am I going too fast?
Yes.
Sorry. Classroom in action.
IL?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, IL. Sorry, Illinois Classroom in Action. If you just type in Classroom in Action, it just pops up though.
Got
But it's IL Classroom in Action.
Oh, this is.
.org. It's what she said yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Let me see too if I can find.
Okay. Illinois class. On your search bar. What are you looking for? Okay. Are we?
if we can find, if you see that and you click on ELA, it'll take you to the ELI Illinois, and then you would click on whatever grade you are. And then there's tons of different resources on here. There's a lot too that connects to like park and park vocabulary. But the bookmarks are the first link, so like the 6th grade standard bookmarks. And you'll see it has the anchor standard, the essential skill and concept, some question prompts, and then there's the academic vocabulary. And then if you really want to be adventurous, it has the Spanish one.
What's this one?
This is, so if you go to the classroom in action, the ELA,
Okay.
and then click on your grade level.
Okay.
And then whatever is the first under the essentials is the book.
Okay.
So let's see the difference.
I know. Well, it should be.
So like my idea is I'm literally going to give every student this bookmark as we're reading novels, and so they see like this is what we're covering for this skill, and until they can master it. And then my thought was I'm almost going, if you were in the session yesterday, she did book ladders. So I was going to put the academic vocabulary as their book ladder that they had to gradually get to the top then for each vocabulary term. So that's one. This is the Florida Resource Center graphic organizers. You can, it's got a ton of them, so you can differentiate it and change it by grade. I just picked up, and it also has like what, so like this is narrative text structure, and then it has all different graphic organizers for narrative text structure. You cannot type directly in this, but what I've done is done like a screenshot of it and then put it in Google Drive. Or you can print it. But yeah, these are all free. Theirs connects to the Florida standard, so you could, if you wanted to, you can convert the Florida standard into the Illinois standard, but they have tons of free tools. And then they have games too, so like characters. What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have binders.
Yeah.
You guys love it.
Awesome, yeah.
It's free. It's a nice free tool. And then the differentiated instruction, I can put this, but these are best practice for differentiated instruction. This is from I liked it because it was current March of 2018, and it does go into like just the different differentiated practices, kind of the multi-tiered support system. It talks about if you want to understand more about that. And then it also has a ton of like just different graphic tools. So like you can see the elements of differentiation is where I pulled this from, as well as some different strategies, the impact of differentiated instruction. Some lesson plan components of differentiated instruction. So if you weren't sure what to include, is that better? So it's like lesson plan, my assessment, my teaching strategy. And then how do I differentiate from based off that? Can I differentiate my objective based on every student's need? Can I differentiate my product? Maybe the end product is this person's doing this, but that person's doing a podcast. What are my extension activities? Really kind of thinking about that. So then there's just some different components here. It's worth a read. Are there any other questions or anything else anybody wanted to see? Did you have something you wanted to
Go into your drive and share it with me. I just shared the iReady vocab list. Scroll over them. And then see where that shows you by level. Student growth.
I'll have another jump.
So now I have like say.
Do you even do?
Did you watch it yet?
Never.
You watched it yet?
Presentation. That's the first time to do one to see where we were. Okay. Never seen this.
I've never seen it.
It's like a disgrace.
That's what this should be.
Let's say.
Protected.
How does he do it?
I wouldn't know, I haven't
You
seen
got
it.
there, go back. Compare
Thank
those
you.
two.
Sorry, I'm just a little nervous.
So since we all use iReady, this is a grade by grade vocab list that I did not know existed until last spring after the year was mostly done. But the good news is when you go to Parks like standards on what they're assessing for vocabulary, all of the 4th grade Greek and Latin roots were there. So it's a pretty close comparison. Goes all the way down to 1st grade. And then just what lessons are introduced at each instructional lesson. I found this when you log into iReady, you click resources and there's an iReady vocab list. But again, you can click on any one of those hot links and go to a grade level. It'll scroll down to that page and show you which words are presented by grade.
Jason, when you say by lesson, that's the iReady instructional
Yeah,
lessons, right?
yeah. So like lesson 1, that's the order it's going to be presented.
Does anybody else have any Google issues?
I had issues with the Peacock Wi-Fi yesterday. As soon as I switched to the Tech Camp, it worked fine.
I'll try and pull it up. But we also too, as a committee, we realized that if you really dive into iReady, there's tons of free stuff that you can utilize. They have a lot of like good resources for vocabulary. They have stuff for comprehension. So whatever skill you'll see, like where the student having a problem with or trouble with, you can pull strategies directly from iReady if you log into their homepage.
Oh, I would have got.
Yeah. Sorry, this isn't, I'm trying to get it open.
That's okay.
Is this one Jason sent you? Because I'm not, I don't think I'm on either.
That's probably like their homepage or my homepage.
No, found it. Because you said walk over this.
Okay.
I'm looking, I was.
But then like you can look, there's different ones, so like that's narrative text, you can see some of that, but it's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Or I've like used an idea and
All of that.
If you want to follow
it.
Yeah, like what are some things with character needs to do?
Right.
Perfect, thank you. We should do that. There's a lot.
Are there on the standard?
Yeah, I just feel like it narrows it down so much, because otherwise, it just, you know. Still. Yeah.
I do not know what a summary is.
I can see everything you do. Hold on. But the
You do that. Yeah. That's what I said.
just lessons.
Is she Euro? Is she Euro? Is it more? Class?
Oh.
All about that big little.
We try to clean it up too. It was like drop, like little tiny drops everywhere.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Like, oh, so bad. And then it was wet, so I couldn't, because I wiped it, so I couldn't tell if it was like, I know. No, like, there's still grass growing out there. So, like, that is I almost did, but it was still a little wet, like, and it wasn't even like everybody, I got it mixed in. So, a couple of months, you know, like, wipe down the oh, no, it was not there when I was there. I just told kids to go at it. I didn't really know that.
Analyze the text, like, you know.
Oh, right. Oh, because I told them, because they answered how many players, I'm like, yeah. Thank you. But there's how many words a lot of hydro.
Does anybody have any questions or anything?
Yeah, some of the kids
I wrote sixth grade.
What's like a fourth down? That's definitely a hard way.
How do I tell about that? Because they don't care what they say.
No, well, I gave the kids the option, and then I finally got them excited about the game. And then some of them wanted free time on the Chromebooks, like.
Comes to our next session. Or no? The same. Not as good Sorry, that was my bad. I didn't realize.
Oh, this is a computer game. That's okay. Maybe I'll like it really. No, my kids like run orders.
Yes.
They like to run starting.
I know that. Oh, I know. I feel like the other part that I kind of learned as well is, and I don't think we really touched on this, but with the universal screening, you're supposed to also do the progress monitoring, which I was doing this year, but how are you making those connections with the universal screening with your progress monitoring?
Come to tier 2, tier 3 on Wednesday.
We'll be part of that. So that's just something to kind of keep in the back of your head, like where does my progress monitoring come in when I'm doing my universal screening?
The session we have.
Yeah, but you gotta go for it.
No, it's still.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow should be a nice day.
Bye for now.